So you're founding senior fellow at the Discovery Institute.
Right.
In fact, I really came to Discovery Institute in large part because of you.
You're almost founding.
Yeah.
I think it was 98, I was 96.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I came here in 98. And you've done a bunch of things. Obviously, you've written a wide range of books. You have been a businessman and an entrepreneur for many years. You're now actually on the board of Discovery.
I don't get there nearly as much as I'd like, but I hope next year to have more time for travel.
Terrific,
So then
terrific.
Get out here more frequently.
Well, of course, we're at this tech conference, and you talked yesterday about this idea for a kind of purely informational type of money, and it was really a thought experiment having to do with blockchain. I mean, how would you sort of distill your basic idea?
Yeah, I mean, I had this idea back about 10 years ago, right when Bitcoin was coming out, and I saw Bitcoin at the time, and I never had a good feeling about it. The idea of the mining there, it seemed highly artificial. Just the amount of energy that you had to throw at it for ever decreasing amounts of Bitcoin. It just seemed that there were lots of problems with it. But beyond that, it still seemed that you were buying into pretty extensive infrastructure. There was still a fair amount of centralization going on there. So what I really did in this talk was present a thought experiment in what would be, mathematically speaking, the least centralized possible currency. And so what my springboard into this was to pose a question: is a DIY informational mint possible? Mint being not the things you pop in your mouth, but a way, the place where you make money and or create money or manufacture it. So, so it seemed to me in the history of money that when there were gold coins, you could, as a private party, get the gold out of the ground, purify it to government standards, and then get a coining press and make those coins in a way that would be indistinguishable from government coin, but that also would not provide an insult to the economy. It's not that you'd be counterfeiting in the sense that you would if you had a printing press. Right. So you wouldn't be artificially inflating the money supply. There would be all these constraints on proliferation of currency, which you want. You don't want things just going crazy. So question then was, well, could you have something comparable in a purely informational world? Can you, as a lone individual, create currency that is going to then be created by the individual, but will have legitimacy? That could count, that will have intrinsic value rather than depending on some sort of fiat authority trust. And so that was the thought experiment, and it uses some insights from Bitcoin, but I think it goes much further. So I need a blockchain. I need computation to be scarce, and when I get certain minimal assumptions, I need to have hashing, where you've got these one-way functions that really mix things up. And if I've got public key cryptography, it seems I can get a system that's very minimal infrastructure. I just need a blockchain that keeps the blocks in an order, no backdating.
Okay,
that's the problem.
Kind of key.
That's key. You can't backdate because it's pure information. Information is basically intellectual property. So the first time it appears, that's where you can claim ownership. And when I do that, I can get an informational currency where if computation is a scarce resource, so you don't have infinite computation.
So this is the limit then, is ultimately it's going to be computation still.
So you got to, and so then you could, as it were, cash it out as hashes, count the number of hashes, and you can do this in a way where there's a proof of work of the individual tied to the individual using hashes, using public key cryptography. It's interesting, public key cryptography, what it isn't really doing in my system is encrypting and decrypting messages. What it's doing is identifying somebody and then allowing signatures. And then so that you know you're dealing with the person, there's verification of the person being, or the agent being the one associated with that public key, private key. The private key is always going to be kept private. But the thing is that private key and the public key, there can be a lot of anonymity with that. And I like anonymity.
Yes, so you and George Gilder seem to disagree on this.
Well, I do, but for me, there's this old Stay scale cartoon where you have this bank robber. He goes into the bank, and he's running away, or he's in there, and then there's another guy who's the bank or banker, government guy, who's got all this money and looks and walking out and says amateur.
Yes.
For me, it's like the government, people they're the ones who need the most watching. They're the ones who, in a sense, can legitimize criminality in a way that I think the ordinary criminal can't. So I'm less concerned about this proposal leading to underground economies with criminals going off. I mean, I think there's always
that
dangers.
exists anyway with cash.
Dangers are going to always be there.
Right.
Technologies are always going to be abused. But it seems to me the greater threat is the big brother, the centralization. At this conference, when I hear about the Internet of Things, that's to me nightmarish. Where everything,
everything records.
Everything. This one fellow was saying, if we could have a fork so we can keep track of how much food you're putting in your mouth. It's like, well, have enough discipline so you don't have to do that. But then if somebody's tracking that, then there can be a value judgment. Oh, you're moving that fork too much.
Yeah. Someone in the Department of Health and Human Services is tracking your caloric intake.
So it's, so how, do we put a premium on freedom, or do we put a premium on some centralizing authority's view of what's the good for us? And I don't trust the centralizing authorities.
And so this is a sort of virtue of this proposal, is it's much more genuinely decentralized.
It's trying to push the decentralization as far as possible. And I think, and it's almost, there's a mathematics that carries you through. If you're going to claim ownership of it, it's got to be something like this. And then if that item of information is going to count as currency, it seems it's going to have to be something like this. It's going to have to be some sort of proof of work tied to the individual that you get into the blockchain. But this blockchain it's very minimal. That's the point.
It's not something that's going to require massive amounts of energy.
And I think the rules will be set in advance. There'll have to be some automated bookkeeping, but it's not the sort of peer-to-peer networks where you're making up rules as you go along. It's like, oh well, let's see. We didn't like the way this worked out, so let's have a hard fork here. And then the rest of the currency, you thought you maybe got some bitcoins, but no, we're not going to give you those.
Change the rules.
So I think that's the danger there.
Okay.
In my view.
Right.
But it's interesting. I've seen at this conference a religious impulse.
Yes.
Like either Bitcoin is the thing or gold is the thing.
Absolutely.
And for me, I tend to be much more of a pragmatist, but there are certain non-negotiables for me, and I think freedom of thought and expression, freedom of being able to live your life as you see, live by your conscience, and it seems that there are lots of forces that are moving against that, and historically, I think, governments love monopoly. They love to control currency, and it seems to me there are good reasons to think that currency does not need to be a governmental entity.
Hong Kong seems to work pretty well.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I want to switch to this abiding theme of the conference, and of course it's in the name of the Bradley Center, right, for Natural and Artificial Intelligence here at Discovery. But this is a kind of abiding theme and a point of disagreement clearly among the participants in the conference. But how would you distill? What is the kind of, if there is a key difference or the key difference between natural and artificial intelligence, what is it? Where's the cleavage?
Well, I think you said it today. There's a metaphysical issue. What is the nature of intelligence? And us. We're humans. Are certainly. We're intelligent beings. Do we embody something that is not is more than a machine, or actually qualitatively different from a machine, I think is what we want to say. And I think if we come at this as Christians or theists, we're made in the image of God. Is God a machine? God is immaterial. I think didn't you do your work on divine simplicity?
Absolutely,
So it's I think there's that. So if we come at it from certain philosophical and metaphysical principles, I think we'd say, no, this can't be. But then I think there are more practical scientific concerns about, are there any inherent limits to what computation can do? what are the sorts of things we do? I mean, one of my favorite quotes in this, I don't know it offhand in verbatim, but it was actually from Descartes' On Method, where he says there's a certain nimbleness to intelligence that machines can never have. They're always going to be adapted. And this is, I thought George Montagnez said it perfectly. You know, there's always these biases. You know, I think Arnold Toynbee said there's no tool that works for everything. You know, tools have to be adapted. These machines are tools. They have to be adapted to solve certain problems. But there's this infinite malleability. It seems that there is nimbleness to intelligence, which are absent from machines. You know, and I think we see it. I mean, you know, I look at my Siri, you know, and you know, I do my text, and then the next word is recommended. You know, and it's way off so often. You know, it's that we have the creativity, the ability to use language to, and then not just use language to convey meaning, but I mean the plays on words, the poetry, all of these things. I mean, it seems that this goes so far beyond anything that machines are capable of. So but you know, I think there are lots of lines of evidence. I know Penrose was doing a Gödelian type move against it. I mean, one thing for me that's which didn't come out today in the conversation was, you know, there's Bob was talking about, well, there are things that are non-algorithmic, and that's true, okay? And if we can do things that are non-algorithmic, then we're not computers. You know, I mean, that's clear. It seems that we're throwing lots and lots of computation at things these days, and we're able to keep, Moore's law seems to keep going, but at some point, we are going to run into a limit. And the interesting thing is, you know, if you think about search, you know, if you're doing a blind search, let's say you have 2 to the m things that you're searching, okay? Now, if you go 2 to the m plus 1, okay, you have to double your computing power to do a brute force search of that space. So every time you double, you know, the search space, you double the computing power that you need. Now the thing is, you can get problems very quickly. You know, if there's this whole NP completeness stuff, where you know you've got a traveling salesperson problem. You know, I'm not sure what it is. If you get up to 500, it's probably way below that.
I'm sure it is.
You know, then you're not solving it. So there, you know, so are there? You know, it could well be that there are just lots of problems that you know, throwing computational resources is just not going to get you anywhere. You know, so but it seems that we can get to places. You know, but it seems also the sorts of examples that keep coming up are, you know, Go, chess. You know, these sort of constrained,
they're
very
biased
mathematical,
at the very beginning, and then they get to search several hundred million times, right? And sort of run this out. So, child needs to see about 10 cats, and then she recognizes a cat, right? Machines aren't doing that. They show them 20 million images. You know, they get pretty close. Or
so I think that's well put. So you know, so it's you know, and I think there's also a problem that I find is what I call a file drawer effect. You know, so you train a machine, you know, to then figure out what's the next word, to extract some sort of meaningful sentence or to compose some language about some text that the machine has been exposed to, and you get something that looks, oh, this is interesting. This is kind of, I mean, almost, it might be insightful or so. But then you ask, you know, for all the things that the machine has generated in response to text, you know, that was culled by some AI aficionado who's trying to make the machine look
really
good. So give me all the boners, all the stupid things that the machine does, all the stupid things I see Siri doing that end up in the file drawer, which you don't put up at one of these presentations. You know, and the thing is, those sorts of embarrassments, humans aren't going to do those. You know?
And this is the stuff that it's always off-site, you know. And so this is, I mean, it is fundamentally, I think they're both sort of empirical and pragmatic arguments here, but there are also these metaphysical arguments that are always just kind of under the surface in these discussions, for sure. Bill, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
We need to do this more often.
Definitely. Good to see you.